Dr. Jeffrey Halstead has been Canandaigua's hometown dentist for more than 35 years, offering routine dental care as well as cosmetic dentistry, implants, and dentures by their highly trained and experienced staff. Visit them online at canandaiguadentistry.com or find them on Facebook and Instagram.
Bucky good in the ball!
Santel all the way to the basket. Foul, lays it in for
two! Good morning, high school basketball fans. Welcome to the Upstate Hoops podcast here on Monday, January 29th, 2024. I'm Jim Sinacropi. Be joined with Paul Russo and Kyle Evans here inside the FingerLakes1.com studios in Seneca Falls. We'll look back at the past week as usual. We'll preview next week's games, new power rankings, but also we're going to take a look at the boys' sectional classification standings as of today. And then next week we'll take a closer look at the girls. And then, of course, on the way home for the rest of the season, we'll be spending a lot more time looking at sectional classifications and possible seedings, and then the brackets come out. So we're moving right along here. Before we get into things, fellas, I mean, it's Monday morning, the Super Bowl set, right? Kansas City against San Francisco. And just thoughts on the games yesterday? You guys, assuming you watched them both?
Yeah. Lions, what are we doing? Dan Campbell, a lot of questions. I mean, I respect it. I'm one of the guys who don't mind going for it on fourth down every now and then, but just take the three.
Well, in that situation,
twice take the three.
You make it a three-possession game. It's hard to believe that San Francisco could come back from it at that point. So, situationally, not a great time to go for it.
Yeah, they took the points in the first half. Remember, they got the field goal before halftime instead of going, it was, 21-yard field goal. But, yeah, in the second half, he was just being aggressive like he has all year. But, yeah, I think the 49ers were the team that we expected all along to be there in the NFC. They barely got past the Packers, though. They had to come back down 17, so a little bit of a scare. And the Chiefs, I mean, man, every year now, no matter what, this was considered a down year because of their offense, and they're right back there.
Yeah, Baltimore couldn't score 17 points. I give this one to Andy Reid, though, more so than Patrick Mahomes. Mahomes didn't have that great a game. People put a lot of focus on Mahomes, but in my mind, Andy Reid shut him down, and Lamar Jackson just can't seem to make it happen.
Yeah, the Chiefs scored in their first two drives and didn't score a touchdown again. And the Ravens had 9 possessions after the Chiefs scored their 2 touchdowns and still lost. It's just mind-blowing.
Yeah, well, 2 weeks till the Super Bowl, so time to really dig in and focus on your high school basketball coming up here for the next couple weeks. The Upstate Hoops podcast, all of our coverage of Wayne Finger Lakes High School basketball is brought to you thanks to the support from Generation Bank, serving the financial needs of the Finger Lakes since 1870. Little John and Barbie Orthodontics. Check out Dr. Rod and Dr. Liz online at littlejohnortho.com. And Rosselli Northern, supporting local construction since 1929 with premium products and quality service. Cicino's Pizzeria and Restaurant. Order online at cicinos.com. Dr. Jeffrey Halstead, Canandaigua's hometown dentist for more than 35 years, and DeSanto Propane since 1937. The difference has been DeSanto Propane. So, dive right into it here, looking at last week's action on the court. And the last undefeated team on the boys' side has fallen on Saturday night. East Rochester lost to School of the Arts 48-45, despite 11 points from Eli Tanner and 10 from Dan Preston, 10 from Ray Allen. So that's your last undefeated team, and that was a 6-7 School of the Arts team that took them down. So it's been wanting to see East Rochester play some top talent in. I still don't know if they have, but they are 14-1, great start to the season. The other thing I kind of want to talk about on the boys' side, fellas, is Marcus Whitman boys. They had a week, right? Wednesday, they beat Batavia 53-44. Logan Storms led the way with 24 points. And then the one that really caught some people's attention was Friday night. They go to Geneva and come out of there with a 54-35 win. Brody Royston led the way there with 16 points. Miles Prendergrass had 13 points, 10 rebounds. Logan Storms had 12. Andrew Green led the way for the Panthers at 10. And, Paul, how about the Wildcats? I mean,
Yeah.
they're that win against Geneva, you put that together with a win against Newark.
Yeah, I mean, kind of hard to ignore, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty interesting, and I don't know how much I want to table some of this for, at least for me personally, until we get to the sectional standings, because it's pretty interesting. Not to give too much away where they kind of stand in B2, but at least for the league stuff, right, it's pretty apparent they can stack up with pretty much everybody on the safe side there.
They played Wayne closer than
yeah.
most East opponents have as well.
So, I don't know, that team's young, and they're good like this off the bat. It's going to be one of those things where, you know, this year's going to be a little bit tough, just given how Wayne's got a pretty substantial lead for a league standing already, kind of going into this final, 2.5 weeks of the regular season, right?
Yeah, there's 16 actual game days left.
Yeah.
But that's not counting the Sundays because, of course, they don't play.
Right. So, you know, obviously in terms of maybe that league element of it this year, it's probably all wrapped up. But for Class B2 and sectionals, this is a team that they're going to at least get one home game. I kind of go back to what I said at the beginning of the year on them. Once they get going a little bit here and be good, and they got that rhythm going, this is a pretty apparent machine that kind of expected maybe a little bit from Coach O'Connor.
Yeah, they're the second hottest team right now on the boys' side. I mean, Wayne's won 10 straight. They've won 7 of 8. Only loss being to Wayne. And like you said, they were right in that game in the fourth quarter. And remember, back on December 19th, when you guys were calling the game, I believe, in Minders, they lost by 7. They fell to 3-3.
Right.
Since then, they've been just rolling past these teams.
Yeah, 10-4 after that win over Geneva. Greg O'Connor's doing some cooking in the kitchen with the young team and Marcus Whitman. Another team that had a nice week, the Lions boys. Monday night, they defeated Geneva. Geneva's bit the brunt end of both of these first two segments here. But Lions beat Geneva 55-49, which evened up the season series between the two. Not a team they normally would play twice, but this year they are, as Lions is an independent. Devin Williams, 23 points, 21 of them coming in the second half in that win for Lions, which moved them to 12-2. And then on Friday night, they had a little bit of a challenge with the former Wayne County foe. The Sodus Spartans came in at 8-3. Our Lions went to Sodus, and they came out with a 70-51 win to improve to 13-2. Dropped Sodus to 8-4. Devin Williams again leading the way with 18 points. Mike Briggs with 17. Jameer Johnson with 16. Stephen Lebrecht with 12. Terrence Barber II had 12 to lead Sodus. So, yeah, I mean, things are going pretty good for the Lions, right, Kyle?
Yeah, they've won 9 of their last 10 games, playing more out-of-league opponents. The Geneva win, it was close for a while, and then the Devin Williams third quarter, fourth quarter, they pulled away. And as for the Friday night game, Sodus, again, was in that game at halftime. It was 33-24, just a 9-point difference. Like they've been all year, even with East Rochester. They've been in these games at halftime, and in the second half is kind of where they, drop off a bit and let teams pull away. So, yeah, Lions is rolling despite their, new schedule. Great matchup coming up this week, as we'll talk about later. But, of course, Lions 12-2.
I'm just saying that they're this scheduling is going to help them in the postseason too, not playing that Wayne County schedule.
Can I just say, Devin Williams have a week, but he had so much energy when we talked to him post game too on Monday up at that game. It was one of those things where I don't know if he maybe necessarily expected to be the one being interviewed type thing, but if you were to have a team full of Devin Williams, I don't think that'd be the worst thing in the world. But, clearly just a really overall great team effort through the week for the Lions. I thought the game against Geneva, being able to kind of see it was really, I thought, great on both sides. I know it was a rough week for Geneva, but
It's a
it's a
good game.
big learning block for them this past week, I thought. And that's something that even Coach Collins kind of mentioned post-game to us was like, hey, look, we aren't going to be afraid to kind of do this if we got to and, kind of fight through this and be a good stepping stone for the team. I mean, there's a lot of underclassmen on that team that can carry this on and use it for future seasons and future games even this year. So kind of good stuff all around in that sense. But, that Lions team, man, if there were any questions about where they kind of stood going into from last year to this year, I think it's kind of been answered. Devin Williams, obviously, like we mentioned, good week. Mikey Briggs, again, kind of that fearless, no fear mentality. Same as last year. Seeing LeBron and Jameer Johnson. Right? Yeah, I mean, Jameer Johnson, I thought, handled Geneva pretty well. I mean, they're kind of honing in on him a lot on defense, and he was able to get his looks when he could and still cause enough of a ruckus down low that ended up being a difference maker in my mind as well. So that Lions team, again, look to them to be pretty good there in C1 as we get to that point.
Wednesday night was the continuation of that Newark-Wayne game. So they got together in Wayne for one half of basketball, picking up from when there was a power outage a few weeks ago. So I think Wayne took a small lead into that game, right? What was it, 5 points?
Yeah, it was 33-28 halftime.
Yeah. So you're thinking, Wayne probably will pull away in the second half as they have, but that wasn't the case at all. The game was tied with 62 with 18 seconds left, and then Steven Habecker scored the game-winning layup with 1.8 seconds. Not the guy you think would be hitting that last-minute shot, but he came through, made a nice drive on the baseline, finished with the left hand, and Wayne picks up a 64-62 win over Newark. And, looking at the Finger Lakes East from preseason and even into the season, it seems like this Newark team is the one team that on paper can really hang with Wayne and maybe compete with them for the Finger Lakes East title. So this was a great opportunity. But Wayne comes through. Cam Blankenberg, 19 points. P.J. Ostrowski, 16. Aiden Twist hit 4 3-pointers. We don't know if some of those were Friday or some of them were like 2 weeks ago. It was a weird thing having to make up that game. And then on Friday, Wayne defeats Minders in Seneca Falls 55-54. So Minders hanging tough with that Wayne club. Blankenberg again leading the way with 23 points. Ostrowski with 18. Jake Prain led the way for Minders with 15. Griffin Hillmeyer had 13. And, that Newark-Wayne game was probably the game of the year in the Finger Lakes East, and it took 2 weeks to complete.
Yeah, how about it? First time for everything in that sense. But, yeah, I mean, the thing I take away from that game more than anything, right, is, we've kind of noticed now, going back to last week even too, that Geneva-Wayne game that me and Kyle were at. Blankenberg and Ostrowski kind of are big too, but you see these other guys kind of step up too here every now and then. And I know in that Geneva game, Aiden Twist had a nice little run in the third quarter, and obviously Steven Habecker being right place, right time type scenario, right? I mean, it's one of those things where you may not be, quote-unquote, the known guy to be able to do that, but at the end
I don't even know if it was drawn up that way,
right,
but
exactly.
When watching the replay, he gets the ball, and he probably had a chance to pass it off,
right.
But he saw an opportunity to drive on the left side and finished uncontested at the lane. I mean, that's a great thing for a coach to see when you got somebody that's not one of your top scorers willing to go ahead in that situation.
Right, but that's what I mean, right? I mean, nobody really remembers Malcolm Butler for anything besides that interception, right? And that Seahawks-Patriots Super Bowl, a little callback there. But, that's what I kind of mean is, like, found himself in the right place at the right time and was able to get the win for the Eagles, Yeah,
and the best part is they meet again next Friday night in Newark, so that'll be a great game.
It'll feel like the third time, but it was really the second.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. What's your thoughts on Newark, Kyle? I mean, this was an impressive loss, if you can have one, for the Reds, and they're after that loss on Wednesday, they were 10-3, so they're having a great season as well. Like we kind of sometimes an afterthought because they've been upset. Or they lost to Wayne. They've been upset by Geneva, but they're still right there.
Yeah, they've actually lost 2 of 3, which is crazy because they're still 10-3, or 11-3. Sorry, but yeah, they're hanging tough even in their losses. The Geneva game was a bit of a surprise to me, but I think it all comes down to the scoring aspect of things. I mean, one night you see Kellen Foster, 27 points. Next night, Janora Allen's leading the way. I think it's all about the scoring. I think they're a great team overall, though. And I think this next game in Newark might be a way to get their first win against Wayne. They're like we just saw, they're right there, even with making the game up.
Yeah, so they're down by 5 at halftime before that game was suspended. Then they come back on Wednesday night and basically play one half of basketball, and Newark won that half.
Yeah, that's true. And what did they hit? 6 or 7 3-pointers in the second half, I read. So they were shooting the ball really well. Just that last second layup is what got them. So
a couple other notes here on the boys' side. Thursday night, the Honeoye Bulldogs won their 4th straight with a 45-39 win over Dundee Bradford. Landon Washburn with 22 points to lead the way there. So Honeoye starting to pick it up. That win proved the record to 10-5. Saturday, HAC improved to 12-2 with a 75-54 win over Bloomfield. Harlan Novi Marks with 27 points, 14 rebounds. Ryan DiArduini with 26 points there. So a couple guys filling up the box score there for the Wolves. Bloomfield was led by John Nelson with 18, and Cam Smith held to just 13. So shout out to HAC having a great season. And Honeoye, like I say, 4 straight wins. Also got to mention Dylan Caraballo threw in 32 points for Waterloo in an 87-77 win over Haverling this week as well. So nice 32-point night there for Dylan Caraballo. Moving over to the girls' side. And we'll start it out here talking about Tuesday night. The Lions girls are playing a pretty weird schedule. They played Miners twice. They also played Waterloo on Tuesday night. Waterloo with a 59-49 win. Addison Breed with 25. Macy Muller with 13. Jayla Bell led the way for Lions with 15. And Janiyah Bell, just a 7th grader, 10 points, 15 rebounds in that loss. But Waterloo really kind of struggled out of the gate, but they've got it together now. They're 9-6 after that win on Tuesday night. And the Lions, that dropped them to 8-5. They'd lose to Minders later in the week as well. Tuesday night, Newark girls played a tough East High team and won 63-60. Takayla Vaughn with 22 points and 19 rebounds. Arizona Chapel with 15 points. Naomi Jones 10. And then on Saturday, Newark girls come back, play another out-of-league game against Eastridge team. A good Eastridge team, and they win that 57-55. 20 points for Vaughn in that one, 12 for Naomi Jones, Karina and Tally with 10. And, the Newark girls have really kind of put something together this year, and I think this was a kind of a watershed week for them where they pick up 2 wins in 2 close games against 2 Rochester City teams. East High, 10-3 after that loss. Eastridge, 10-5. So these are good teams. And Newark takes care of business once on the road and once at home, and really coming together.
Yeah, it's been interesting. I think it kind of begins at some point really last year, if I remember right. They didn't get out of the gate really good last year, but kind of built something a little bit in the second half of the year. Coach Ann Kearney back at the helm at that point, and carried over to this year. I mean, it's a really good sight to see. I know they've had a little bit of their own, kind of bumps in the road here and there, but the fact of the matter is they were able to get wins against the caliber of opponents they'll see later on. Mm-hmm. And that's a pretty good feather in the cap moment. And I go back to this, right? Like, sure, it's a close game on paper and stuff like that, but at the end of the day, they won. And that's one of those things where I think we always kind of lose in translation a little bit, right? Is like, yeah, it was close, they won, but it's like how they get the win, they were able to figure it out. And at the end of the day, you get that notch in the win column and not the loss column. That's the biggest thing.
Takayla Vaughn.
Yeah, she's been impressive, leading the way almost every night. And I also just want to mention, in their 4 losses, 2 of them are against Waterloo. They lost by 4 and by 7. Yeah. And then Minders, they lost by 7 as well. Right. So they're in all these games. And their one little, blowout type loss was against Pittsford Sutherland when they lost by 12, a non-league game.
And that's not a horrible loss.
Yeah.
And that's why these, like I said, this is a good East High team. It's a winning Eastridge team. So a really impressive week for the Lady Reds. And Also in the Finger Lakes East Thursday night, Wayne came to Seneca Falls to take on Minders. Minders with a 49-31 win. Kaylee Marvin, the former Gananda star, now playing for Wayne, led the way with 11 points. Lauren McDermott had 17 for Minders. Prime time 365 was in town, interviewing the girls after the game. But that win moved Minders to 11-3, and basically with some of these teams we're talking about, whether it's Waterloo, Newark, Minders, I mean, the Finger Lakes East teams are going to be pretty tough outs in sectionals. And speaking of Finger Lakes East teams, how about Pelmac? They improved to 11-1 with a 63-35 win over Palmyra Macedon on Friday night. The Bloomfield girls in the West improved to 14-2 with a 69-34 win over South Seneca. Ashlyn Wright with 27 points, Lily Bauman with 17, Kayla McCombs with 17 in that one. And then Minders back in action 2 nights after that Wayne win, hosting Lions. We mentioned it a little earlier. 51-45, they get the win. So the Lions girls play a pretty tough schedule. Maddie Verkey, 16 points. Peyton Verkey, 14 points. Jayla Bell had 16 for Lions there. Some other notable performances on the girls' side. Congratulations to Kylie Chapman. She had her 1,000th point on Tuesday for Canandaigua, as Canandaigua defeated Brighton by 7. And there's another 1,000-point scorer in the book here in the Wayne Finger Lakes area. Canandaigua not a Wayne Finger Lakes team, but we always like to mention or follow them, see how they're doing. And 1,000 points for Kaylee Chapman. Congratulations. The Gananda girls, specifically Ava Jenny, had a big week. Gananda on Wednesday defeated HAC 70-32. On Friday, they defeated North Rose Wolcott 73-21. No surprises there. But on a Wednesday, Ava Jenny with a program record 40 points. And if that wasn't enough, she came back 2 nights later, poured in 31. 71 points over 2 games for Ava Jenny. Not too shabby, eh?
Yeah, it seems like since Kaylee Marvin's left, she's just been like, all right, I'll take over. But yeah, it's been super impressive. Scoring 40 of their 70 points? And I believe that the record previously was 1996, and it was 37. So it's been, 30 years, and she sets the new record.
Not quite 30 years. I'll interject on that one.
Sorry.
For other reasons.
28.
But, hey, I mean, I go back to this with her. I did give her a shout-out when we did our preseason picks for Players of the Year, so I'm not surprised. It is kind of crazy, though, a record that kind of stands that long, and I don't want to make it sound weird, but 40 kind of sounds like low-hanging fruit almost in a way to be the record. I don't know. Maybe we'll see her get 41 or 42.
Different on the boys' side.
Right. No, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, you don't see a lot of 40-point games nowadays on either side, but they do happen, and yeah, that is a long time. But kudos to Ava Jenny, not only scoring the 40, but coming back and throwing in 31 the next game. Yeah. Really impressive. So Friday night, one last mention. Individual performances here. Zariah Eldridge had 30 points. That's a career high for her as East Rochester defeated Red Creek 77-28. And I did want to mention, too, real quick, the Geneva girls beat Honeoye 42-33 to improve to 8-5 on Tuesday night. Megan Forbes had 12, Allie Good 12, Kate Good with 11. Ava Higgins led the way for Honeoye with 14. And just wanted to mention that. I mean, this was a team that was a laughing stock last year, basically, right?
Yeah, they switch over that independent schedule this year to try and figure out some things, right, get things back on track.
They're doing it.
It appears, yeah, I mean, I'd say that and then some. I would imagine Coach Desring would probably be very thrilled with even sniffing 500, let alone be over 500.
With that being said, they came back on Thursday and lost to a 3-10 Romulus team 61-36. Right.
Yeah, they've won 3 of 4, and that was our only loss in that 4-game span.
Kind of shocking.
But they are scoring more, a lot more than we saw last year. There was times last year they were scoring 10, 12 points a game.
Yeah.
So
they're definitely rebuilding the program, and it's a program that I think was in the sectional finals against Wayne in 2014. So, I mean, it's been a while, but yeah, got to start somewhere. So, with that being said, let's take a look at the power rankings, the new power rankings. This would be the Week 8 power rankings, and we'll start with the boys. Of course, Wayne sticks at number 1. Man, it would have been interesting to see what the rankings look like if Newark pulled out that win. But Lions all the way up to 2, Newark 3, and look at Whitman at 4. I mean, that to me is a surprise of the year. I never doubt that Greg O'Connor is going to put a good team out there that's going to compete in a tough league like the Finger Lakes East, but they've done more than compete, and this week they kind of went over the top, and yeah, I think they deserve to be number 4. Geneva drops with a tough week to 5. East Rochester only 1 loss on the year, but they're down to 6. Really not a lot of quad 1 wins, I guess, if you want to call it that, for East Rochester. And then Gananda, HAC at both tied for 7. HAC might have a argument. They might be the ones that are most upset looking at these rankings that they aren't getting a little more love. I think they only got 2 losses at this point. Minders boys losing, playing tough against teams like Wayne, but just not getting the wins in the games where they're playing higher quality opponents. And Pelmac rounds it out at 10. So what do you guys think? Is HAC number 1? Is Marcus Whitman a little overrated? Number 2 is HAC not getting enough love out of the Finger Lakes West, having the season that they're having.
I wouldn't say Whitman's overrated. I think they're pretty properly rated at this point. I think it's just tough because you look at it, it's like they beat Geneva, so it's like you probably have to, like the way the week is, and I've explained my kind of process before when I look at it. They won, they did their job for the week, so they should. As I call it, at worst, you stay stationary at that point. And in my eyes, for the week, they deserve to move up. It's pretty interesting. The interesting part for me was like this is, I think, the first week on the boys' side of things, everything was lockstep, though, 1 through 3. Mm-hmm. That was pretty stationary there. HAC is an interesting one. I think it kind of falls a little bit maybe into the same space as the East Rochester kind of side of things in a way, just where they've been winning, but it's like the quality element of it to a degree.
You see, like Whitman, for instance, they're getting tested against Geneva, Newark, even teams like Minders, and HAC, hasn't had that many opportunities to show, where they stand.
Yeah, I didn't just drop Geneva because of that loss to Whitman. I dropped them because they've lost 3 of 4.
Yeah.
So they started 7-2 and they're now 8-5. So that definitely deserves a drop down. I did have HAC up higher, or up closer to the top, I should say. I think I had them 6th or 7th, because they've won 8 of 9.
Yeah, I know.
It's hard to ignore that. And I did want to mention too, even Honeoye, I was thinking about
putting. Could have been 10th, right?
I was going to put them 10th. They've won 7 of 8.
Yeah.
And 4 straight. So they're one of the hotter teams on the boys' side. So yeah, but I do agree mostly with what we have.
Yep, maybe they'll Honeywell might make an appearance next week, and you can make a case that HAC should be higher, even ranked than even Geneva at this point. But we'll take a look and see what the next week's schedule looks like, and see which one of these teams in the power rankings are what Honeywell has to do, and maybe. Who HAC is playing this week. But let's take a look at the girls. And there, no surprise there with Dundee Bradford number 1. Pelmac, a viable candidate for number 1 themselves, but Dundee Bradford just doesn't lose. Gananda, led by Ava Jenny, up to 3. The Minders girls, I think they're really well placed there at number 4. They will play Newark again. I think Newark's going to have that one circled. I think Newark Minders are both pretty evenly matched. That should be a great game. Waterloo girls climbing back up after a slow start to the season, really playing some better basketball now. Of course, they're a young team, so not surprising to see Coach Bree has them trending in the right direction. Bloomfield girls might feel a little slighted at 7. East Rochester girls, they were a top 5 team earlier in the year for us, but just have not been consistently winning games, but still hanging in there. Marcus Whitman girls and Liz Royston up to 9. Lions at 10. Lions plays a tough schedule. They just never have seemed to win any of these games against teams that maybe they were slight underdogs against. If they had won a couple of those, I think they could move up, but definitely there's your top 10 for the girls. Any comments, fellas?
Yeah, I think for me, the girls' side of things have been a lot more what I would call stationary for the time being collectively, and that's just because everybody's kind of just been winning, and there hasn't been a ton of really kind of losing the past week and a half now. Really, I mean, the biggest shift for me was kind of dropping Lions, elevating Bloomfield for me personally. I don't have any huge gripes. I think everybody's kind of at least in the neighborhood of where they should be at the very worst. So it's one of those things where it's weird. I feel like the girls collectively probably have I would say maybe tighter top 10 in a way, just in terms of like competitiveness compared to the boys' side of things. But, in that situation at that point, it kind of makes things tough to see kind of movement week in, week out, because you're either just all kind of winning, and we haven't seen a ton of losing on the girls' side of it this year, so it's kind of just been the case.
Yeah, for me, I had to put Waterloo above Newark because they just beat them 17 days ago.
Right.
And in this 5-game stretch, that's one of their wins, Waterloo. And I can't remember what was up there, but was Bloomfield ahead of Newark?
No, Bloomfield was
Oh,
7,
all
I
right.
think, right?
Yeah, so that's good because I did have Newark ahead of them. But yeah, Bloomfield 14-2. It's crazy.
Yeah, and it's, again, so some of these teams out of the West is tough, but, Dundee Bradford's out of the West. We're consensus that they're the number 1 team. It would be great to see them play Pelmac. And it would also, remember, what do we got, Minders at number 4?
Yeah.
Dundee Bradford beat them by almost 30.
Yeah.
So,
It's so wild.
yeah, so it's not like Dundee Bradford hadn't played anybody.
No.
And they've got Bloomfield in the West, tough team, and they did play that crossover against Minders, really took care of business. So, a really good squad in Dundee. So, let's look at the sectional classifications for just the boys. As we don't got enough time to do both, we're going to do the girls next week. But let's see where things stand in terms of sectional classifications for the first time this season here on the Upstate Hoops podcast. And we'll start with Class A, and of course that's where the Wayne Eagles are, as well as the Newark Reds, as well as the Geneva Panthers. And this is where, you look at the top teams in the Finger Lakes East. Well, they're playing kind of up a little bit this year compared to last year. So teams, and we'll see in a second, teams like Minders and Marcus Whitman, what they got to contend to. But as great as Wayne has been, and as good as we think Newark has been, it's going to be tough to win a sectional title for either of these teams. Because you're dealing with teams like Monroe and East High and Pittsford Sutherland. So, of course, they can do it. Bishop Kearney's in there. Batavia's a little down this year. So I think, when I look at this, Pelmac's in there too, I should mention. But, I think from Geneva at 8 on the way up, that any of these teams have a shot. Maybe, of course, Geneva a little less of a shot than a Wayne or even Newark, but...
Yeah, I mean, the reintroduction, as I call it, of Class AAA this year, we mentioned it a little bit, I think, at the start of the season. We haven't talked about it a ton since, but it's caused quite the discussion, I'd call it, amongst some of these schools that find themselves now in Class A, maybe a slight hair ahead of schedule than when they anticipated there being back up into A. But, yeah, it's interesting. Wayne, we know, has been A2 here for the past several years anyway, when there was the 2A classes.
Yeah, those teams playing against East High for Wayne and sectionals is nothing new.
So for them, I would say I'm not as concerned, pretty much as you've been saying, right, Jim? Where it's like they're kind of used to it, whatever, and I agree. I think you get kind of around that 5 to 6, 7 seed range. Anything is really possible. Where, as I say, you have the guaranteed home game, at least one, and you at least get in front of the home crowd for one, and that can honestly propel teams to get a win and get to that next round of play sometimes, is just even having that home court advantage. So it'll be interesting to kind of see. I mean, it's going to be I don't want to say every hill is kind of tough when you get to sectional time, but it just kind of seems like with A, it's a little bit of a tougher hill for some of these schools this year, not just the local ones. I mean, I'm assuming there's several others that are in other different leagues that are feeling the same way that some of these Finger Lakes East schools are feeling with the reclassifications going on. That
we could also
in that hole.
Certainly see a scenario where you got Wayne versus Newark in a sectional semifinal game, or Geneva versus Newark in a quarterfinal or semifinal game. So, or even a final game if we're lucky. But there's some pretty heavy hitters up there. Some bigger schools in Rochester, Pittsford Sutherland, East High. Monroe.
Right.
So
And I did look. One of these teams two of these teams have played each other. It was Newark and Pittsford Sutherland back on December 8th, and Newark picked up a 4-point win, 55-51. So other than that, though, these teams haven't really met. I looked. Wayne hasn't played any of them. Geneva hasn't played any of them. So yeah, it's going to be tough. This is my first time actually looking, and I was surprised that even how great Wayne's been, they're still not number one in this classification.
yeah, and of course, what cost them was the trip to Orlando where they lost 2 games. They haven't lost a game in New York State yet.
Yeah.
They may not have lost a game, period, if they didn't go on that trip, but that's a little team building thing that they've been doing for years, and it's probably good for them overall. I don't know if they go every year to Orlando, but they've gone before. And you don't really know who you're playing, or it's tough to get a gauge on what those games are like. But they did drop a couple.
Yeah,
in Orlando.
I think the way New York State graded a couple of those teams is A, and then another one is like a B. But so I guess in terms of size, they weren't any different than what they've been used to playing. But even then, I mean, it's hard to, like you said, Jim, you don't actually have a gauge of what you're actually seeing in that scenario.
Well, let's move ahead now to the B classes. And
B1.
B1, Hornell, there's a team that Wayne Finger Lakes teams always seem to run into.
I know why you're up, but I thought about this kind of like a shower thought, if you will. How is Hornell in B? Am I missing something, or is that just a perceived notion of size going on for me?
Well, I don't think it's perceived. I think they got your school, your enrollment numbers, and
Right.
they place them. So they probably are high end of B. But yeah, normally they're playing a team like Newark in sectionals, and this year it will be. But I shouldn't say that. Especially other sports, Minders comes up against Hornell quite a bit in sectionals, and so the thing here is, Minders, when we talk about the Finger Lakes East, is an afterthought. They're probably the 5th best team in the league, maybe 6th. But here they are, 2nd in point standings, and this is the thing you got to understand about high school basketball. The regular season is one thing, but it really all comes down to sectionals. Everybody's trying to win a sectional block, and Minders obviously nicely placed as a top seed. Can they take on a Hornell if they should meet? We'll see. World of Inquiry. Look at World of Inquiry 3 is what, 6 and 9? Is that right? 6 and 8?
6 and 8, yeah.
So a weak Class B1, very winnable for Minders. I don't know about Penn Yan and Waterloo and Mid Lakes down there, but Livonia has not been great this year, is like they normally are. Dansville, so I mean, geez, Hornell's a front runner, but Minders,
Yeah.
should be there. They got every opportunity to be there in a sectional final.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting, and not to give too much away when we get to B2 here in a second, but I would prepare everybody to have a little bit of a sticker shock value there too, to a degree, if B1 then is any indication. But yeah, B1's pretty interesting this year. You kind of mentioned it, right, Jim, a little bit. You look at, say, World of Inquiry at 6 and 8, and they have a neutral, right, point differential at 0 and 0, and then the team right behind them at 500 is Dansville, and they have a negative point thing. So, and obviously, right, that's the point system. That's just the way it goes.
That's how it goes.
It's just kind of funky looking at B1 right now because, like, it does.
B1's better. I'd rather be in B1 than B2, right?
I would, on
Oh,
paper,
yeah,
say that.
100%.
On
We're gonna
paper, I
look
would
at them
say
in a
that.
second,
Right.
and we'll see for ourselves. But
Right. I mean, on paper, right, you'd say that. So, yeah, it's pretty interesting. But for B1 itself, yeah, it appears like, I don't want to outright say like 2-3 horse race, but like if you're Minders, you gotta feel pretty confident at the moment, just looking at it.
yeah, and you'd like to start playing better. If you're Minders, not that they've actually been playing bad, they've had some nice games, but you want to see them improving because it's too much of good of an opportunity,
Right.
I think, this year for the way the cards have fallen for them. No matter how weak it is, if there's one other really good team in there like Cornell, you're going to have to beat them to win a sectional title.
Right.
Yeah, and Hornell's only played one Wayne Finger Lakes team, and that was Newark, and Newark beat them by 13. So,
Wow, so that's encouraging too.
and
if you're
World
Minders.
of Inquiry and Minders actually play tonight.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
Okay.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I think when most people look at that game on the schedule for Minders, you're not thinking much of it, but then you find out they're 2-3 in sectional standings. Turns into a big game. Let's move on to B2. And a very good Avon team, that one loss coming at the hands of the Lions, who are not in Class B2. Who is in Class B2 from the Wayne Finger Lakes? You got Marcus Whitman. They're way down there at 5th, even with the great season that they're having. And you can only imagine if they hadn't won some of these games that we might consider upsets, they would be higher seed or lower seed. Then you got North Rose, Wolcott, and Williamson, but really, Marcus Whitman is the Wayne Finger Lakes here at Upstate Hoops. That's who we're hanging our hat on for Class B2. And yes, Avon's really good. Canisteo Greenwood's really good. Attica and Leroy also good, but I do think that Marcus Whitman, despite their record, they play in a much tougher league than Attica or Leroy. Yeah. So, Marcus Whitman right in the thick of things. I'm sure they would love to break into the top 4 to ensure home games throughout until the semifinals. And a better matchup, but you almost wish Marcus Whitman could be in B1 with Minders.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like I said, the interesting part in this, right, is how the reclassifications went and stuff like that. But yeah, B2 is quite the interesting little thing this year because, as you mentioned, Avon's league, right, probably not as great, but their non-league is more the impressive side of things for them. They also, surprisingly, before I circle back to Whitman, kind of seeing Wellsville actually below 500, admittedly. We're used to them. Obviously, for them, I'm sticker it as this. Until I see them actually out of sectionals, I'm going to classify them as still being a quasi team to beat. That's just the way they always are. But, yeah, for Whitman, like I said, I mentioned him, we'll pick it up here a little bit. Kind of surprising seeing them only at 5th in sectionals. And the moment, right, that's one guaranteed home game. But, yeah, it's almost like you do wish that they were B1 because it's like you look at this B2 and it's a little bit more of a gauntlet situation as it stands right now to B1. That being said, though, I kind of like them in that 5 spot, to channel a little bit of NCAA tournament vibes. I like a 5 seed every now and then, and if the Wildcats happen to be that 5 seed this year, I'm all for it.
They're not one to back away from a challenge. And the other thing, just make people clear that might not understand this, but the B1 champ and the B2 champ, they'll play to go to the Far West Regional in Buffalo, which is one step away from the state Final Four. So ideally, in our world, you'd see Miners win B1, Whitman win B2, and then have that matchup. Doesn't happen a lot of the time, but that's kind of how it would work. So now we move down to the C's, where we're going to see a lot more Finger Lakes West and a lot more Wayne County.
C1.
And, Lions is independent this year, but that does not mean that they might have to go through a former Wayne County team or two in the Class C1. Now, for Lions, winning sectional titles is the standard. And, you can see why in a smaller class of C, where you could accumulate more, but they have been dominant in Class C in terms of the sectional rounds for the past, almost decade. So, but they don't have the top seed right now because East Rochester keeps winning. But right there at number 2, and then you got Pembroke, which is a pretty storied basketball school, and then Gananda.
An interesting note: Lions played Pembroke in what ended up being the second game of that crossover to get the Far West Regionals last year. So, both find themselves in C1 this year.
Yeah, so you could see a rematch of that game. But even heading down to the Bloomfield boys are pretty solid. Red Creek boys could pull an upset. They're that type of squad. It's not your traditional 11 seed. So this is a pretty balanced and difficult C1 class with a ton, like I say, of Finger Lakes West and Wayne County teams in it. Again, you got to feel pretty good if you're Lions. You got to feel pretty good if you're East Rochester. In the Gananda boys and Sodus. I mean, it should be fun. Some of these quarterfinal games should be fun. And then you got, of course, Pembroke there to play the spoiler, because if there was one class where we could almost hope to guarantee a champ, it would be this one, where we got 4 of the top 5 seeds.
Yeah, I mean, C themselves they're rolling 3 different classifications of C again this year for Section 5 on the boys' side of things, C1, 2, and 3. So there's a lot of kind of this Wayne Finger Lakes depth going on in there. Kind of collectively, C1 is definitely, to me, where you see, obviously, like you mentioned him, the kind of the bulk of some of these better teams on the top half of them in a way. But yeah, I mean, if you're going to pinpoint one in terms of class where it's like probably guaranteed slam dunk, it's probably C1. I mean, I like.
Yeah, Pembroke may have something to say about that.
Yeah, but it's one of those things where, and I don't disagree, but it's one of those things where I feel like kind of looking at the standings, like there's going to be some beat up on each other, obviously, in sectional time, but you know, it's definitely a little bit of a deeper class in terms of just everybody's just kind of winning, doing their thing. You know, you have to get pretty far down to get to the first non-500 team even. So
one of the things that I get excited about is that Lions and East Rochester is one of the most historic rivalries in Section 5. It goes back to Jim Boeheim playing for Lions, and he said his worst loss of his basketball career was losing to East Rochester in the sectional final of the Blue Cross Arena. Back then it was the War Memorial. You know, so that's going back. So to see both these teams at the top of the class is kind of exciting because you might see a renewal of that rivalry. And, you know, we don't really know exactly how good East Rochester is. You know, you got an early prediction if that matchup came to fruition?
Well, I don't mean to spoil it, but these teams meet Wednesday night.
Oh, there you go.
spoiler alert.
And
God.
East Rochester actually still has to make up a game with Ganonda. So they have a tough Ganonda team and a Lions team. I would expect these seedings to flip, maybe even Ganonda moving up a little bit. You know, Sodas could still win a couple games to move. So, yeah, there's going to be some changes here in the next 2 weeks.
Wednesday night, that's got to be the game of the year, or one of the games of the year, given what we just saw with those C1 standings.
Yeah, and it looks like the game will be at the Community Center in Lyons.
No, that'll be a good one. That'll be a good one for sure. So moving down through the other classes in C2, you see here that you don't run into a Wayne Finger Lakes team until you get to South Seneca at 9, Red Jacket at 11.
Honeyways at 6.
Clyde. Oh, I missed Honeyway. Okay, so Honeyway kind of, with their winning 4 straight now, is pushing up the standings here in C2. Maybe a shot here for the Wayne Finger Lakes. But other than that, you know, York's very good. Byron Burgeon looks like they're good this year. Wheatland, Chilai, Alexander. So, you know, this will be a long shot. And, again, hoping to get that Wayne Finger Lakes team in so they can match up against someone in C1. But, yeah, let's move on to C3 real quick. And so you see this is always a problem, too. 3 classifications in C. So after the sectional championship weekend, now you got to have a round 1 and round 2 to get to the Far West Regional. It's tough to squeeze those in, so it's kind of tough if you're Class C. And they go by sectional points, I think, for how they determine who gets the bye. And so it's not necessarily the fairest way to do things, I think. But here you have top seed HAC. And again, we talked to them during the power rankings that maybe we're not giving them enough credit. But in Class C3, they're at the top of the list right now. Fillmore and Notre Dame Batavia, traditional tough programs. You see CG Finney in there. You know, they've been in as high as B classes in previous years. North Star Academy, another one. These are 2 charter privates that get placed by the competition committee, and they're both way down in C3. Dundee Bradford's in there, and then you get down to the bottom, you got Naples and Marion as well. But this would be, you know, if HAC is legit, then they could be holding that a sectional title in Class C3, which is something that they have not done as long as I can remember. I have to find out when the last date was, if ever.
Yeah, I'm not too sure on that front, but yeah, I mean, it should be interesting. I would definitely probably pin them as the favorite there. I mean, but the tough part, and you kind of brought up a little bit, Jim, right, is, okay, how good or bad or whatever are actually like CG Finney and North Star Christian? I mean, it's kind of hard to gauge. I think Lions
Finney beat Lions this
I was
year?
about to
They
say
beat-
Lions played Finney, right?
So, I mean, jeez.
Beat them by 6.
Yeah.
But Finney's also lost to teams like Whitman play them. I can't remember. I know Finney's lost to a couple of our local teams. I think Kyle's looking it up right now.
I feel like North Star, or maybe I'm getting,
North Star is definitely
or
down.
am I getting them confused on the girls' side? I think Waterloo played North Star as well at some point, right?
Well, 3 years ago, they ended Minder's season in the sectional finals during the COVID year at North Star Christian, where the final was at North Star Christian, where there was that phantom foul call at the very end of the game. And I know there's some Minders
CG
fans that aren't
Finney,
over that.
sorry to interrupt, played East Rochester, and East Rochester won by 9.
Okay. And that's the only other crossover with the Wing Finger Lakes?
Yep. Other than that Lions game.
Huh, okay. I don't know what I was remembering. But, okay, let's quickly just...
Everything runs together.
A lot of games. Let's run through the final classifications here, down into Class D.
Oh, there's no Class D. Wayne Finger Lakes this year.
Oh, you're right, because the Romulus boys are combined with...
Yeah.
Huh,
And
okay.
the way it is, Marion's up in C3, so.
Well,
Yeah.
that's... Anyway, I don't think we're going to be concerned about Marion making a run.
You never know.
Anything's possible. Anything's possible.
It's white play.
So, again, next week we'll do that with the girls just to get you caught up to speed, and then from there on out we're going to have to look at those sectional standings every show, and, I think we only got, 3 or 4 shows before sectionals start.
Give or take.
So, so we're getting down there as we get closer to Valentine's Day. I know that Valentine's Day means a lot to you couples out there, but to us here at Finger Lakes 1, it means end of the regular season, sectionals starting. So let's look at what we've already kind of spoiled a few of the games coming up this week, but let's take a look at it. On the boys' side, Monday night, Sodas has to travel to South County here in Seneca County. Newark testing themselves out of league. In that World of Inquiry Minders game, as we have seen, is going to be important for sectional standings. Waterloo at Wayne, Palmac at Geneva. Minders getting that rematch against Whitman. Whitman now has been beating teams like Geneva and Newark, but they lost to Minders at home in Seneca Falls, so now Minders going to the Jim Tuck Court in Whitman, and that's a good game to watch, too, on Tuesday night. Wednesday night, let's see if anything stands out there. Naples at South Seneca, maybe? Sorry.
Lions at ER for the boys.
HAC Honeoy.
Yeah.
Finger Lakes West battle. So you got a 2-loss HAC team against a Honeoy team that's kind of on the rise. I'll keep my eye on that one on Wednesday night. Bloomfield at Penn Yan. That's a Finger Lakes West game, if you can believe that. Penn Yan not in the East anymore. And then there's that Lions ER game, huge, on the last day of January. Looks like only one game on Thursday, Marion at East Rochester. So East Rochester's got to come back and play Marion. Shouldn't be a problem, but they're both at home. And then Friday night, full slate. Clyde Sodas, Lions North Rose Wolcott, Gananda Red Creek. Not a lot of good ones. Dundee, Bradford, Bloomfield, Geneva Mid Lakes, Wayne, Palmac. Big rivalry game there, but Palmac just down a little bit. Whitman at Waterloo. And then the big one on next Friday night, Newark at Minders. I mean, that's a pretty big game, I think, for both teams. Newark really needs to get the win to stay up top of the standings in Class A, and Minders, you saw where they were too. It's a chance for them to further solidify their top seed in Class B1. And real quickly on Saturday, nothing Northeast Prep versus at Geneva. And Victor Canandaigua both in action. So, wow. A lot of big games this week to keep an eye on. Girls, take a look at the girls' schedule. Mid Lakes at Waterloo, man, you go back 3 years, that would have been the game of the year. Palmac at Wayne, pretty interesting game. Again, rivalry game for the girls, too. And then Tuesday night, Honeoy at HAC. Clyde at Lions, Gananda at East Rochester. Now there's your game of the week, maybe in Wayne County, definitely in Wayne County, maybe in all the Wayne Finger Lakes. Bloomfield girls at Marcus Whitman will be a good one. Wednesday night, you got Newark at Mid Lakes, Penn Yan at Minders. Penn Yan gave Minders a game earlier this season in Penn Yan. Minders won, but I think it was like 31-29 or something like that. Palmac going out of league. Thursday night, Romulus South Seneca, one of the bigger rivalries in girls basketball, going back a few years, but could be a good game in Ovid. Lions at Red Creek, HAC at Red Jacket, Dundee Bradford at Bloomfield. Now there you go, probably the best game of the year in the Finger Lakes West. Dundee Bradford undefeated, having to go to Bloomfield. That'll be a good one. East Rochester girls at North Rose Wolcott, Honeyway girls at Marcus Whitman. Friday night, Geneva at the Young Women. And Victor at Canandaigua. Wow, talk about rivalry games. Pelmac, tough one against Our Lady of Mercy out of league. Minders at Newark, so that's going to be a good one again. Minders, I don't know if I'd call it an upset, but they beat them first time around. Now Minders at Newark, I bet you Newark's had that circled on their calendar for a while. That'll be a great one. Whitman girls at Gananda. East Rochester girls at Lions will be a fabulous game on Saturday too. So wow, a lot of good games this week, guys. It's definitely worth logging on to Finger Lakes 1 every late in the evening or early in the morning to check out the results and see how it plays out. And of course, we'll be back here next Monday. Probably not at 10 a.m. We'll go to 2 p.m.
Yeah, we just had to shift things around, this week because of other recordings and stuff like that going on. So that'll happen from time to time for other shows. But yeah, you can thank the Bills for having the 10 a.m. slot open on Monday for us this week.
Yeah, that's actually true. We had hoped to maybe be doing a Bills podcast this morning, but anyway, so we've got full slate of games over the next couple weeks. Then we're going to get sectional brackets, and then we're going to be out and about watching it all play out and see if any of these teams can make a run to the sectional title first, Far West Regional second, state Final Four, and always fun to watch.
Yeah.
And then by then it's spring.
Yeah, well, we have 170 games left over the next 16 days.
Wow.
I went through and added them all up, and I broke it down.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't understand the how hard it is to put on seasons like this, let alone the postseason sectionals, with all the scheduling and courts and teams and leagues. So it's quite a spectacle. I think sectional basketball is a spectacle.
I mean, it doesn't get too much better around here. I mean, usually the venues, no matter where they are, whether, Blue Cross, obviously, for the boys, and then Rush Henrietta has been tradition for the girls, at least on the bigger class side of things here recently. I mean, the atmospheres are great. I mean, honestly, that Palmac Waterloo sectional final last year up at Rush Henrietta was quite the sight, and had to wait 12-ish hours, give or take, I guess. A little bit more than that because of the winter weather even, so everybody was a little bit more energized and ready to go. So, yeah, I mean, again, more importantly, though, we aren't quite there yet. We still got, like you mentioned, right, Kyle, 170?
Yep.
A lot of them important. A lot of them are still, we got the final few days of the regular season are, traditionally rivalry games, too. Woohoo. A lot of good stuff coming down the pipe.
But just 33 days till sectional championships, March 1st,
Right.
Ross Arena. So 16 days left of the regular season, but 33 days until
Once it
sectional
starts, it
champions.
happens, right?
Yep.
You're talking about 2 weeks to get through the entire sectional bracket and then on to the super postseason, I guess, the state level stuff. So, anyways, fellas, thanks for breaking it all down. Great coverage as usual, Kyle, on the daily updates, and hope everybody's checking those out every day here. Of course, if you're watching this podcast, I'm sure you do, because there's like I say, a lot of good games this week coming down the pike. So thanks for joining us here on the Upstate Hoops Podcast. Connect with us on Facebook, on X, formerly Twitter, at Finger Lakes 1, and TikTok at FL1 Sports. Subscribe to us on YouTube, and our audio-only podcast is available most everywhere you enjoy your audio content. You can find our show, live stream games, and local news, weather, and sports 24/7 on the free FingerLakes1.com app. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back next week, Monday, 2 o'clock. Until then, have a great week.